Hello again, YouTube. This is Peter with you, and tonight I want to talk about the so-called social justice feminist agenda of Hollywood. Now, in my last video, I talked about the whole burning Nikes protest, and I was very sarcastic about it. But I offhandedly mentioned people claiming ridiculous things like they walked out of Force Awakens because of its feminist agenda and all of these movie critiques that are all based on that idea. Now, some of the comments that I got in my previous video really made me realize that I should make a more elaborate video in which I examine this idea. Is social justice and political correctness a mountain or a molehill? And that's not this video. I'm actually working on that video for a later date. But I wanted to address that specific idea of the so-called feminist agenda of Hollywood, because I'm going to put forward an idea considered for the approval of the Midnight Society or the YouTube watching audience or whatever. When I watch some of these videos where they're complaining about the feminist agenda in Star Wars or Ghostbusters or Doctor Who, sometimes I hear it and I think to myself, do these people, are they listening to themselves? Do they hear what they're saying? Now, first of all, if you're using the term agenda, especially in a context like this, you have a tendency to come off as a crank. Just to let you know that. You're not entirely in the down-to-earth, grounded in this is what's really happening land when you're talking about the agenda of this, the hidden agenda of that. So when you want to start listening to yourself, and gee, is that what I sound like? Maybe start with talking about the agenda of such and such a thing. But here's a radical proposition. All of these things, like an all-female Ghostbusters, or a female Doctor, or Star Wars having a female Jedi protagonist, maybe they are a little bit pandering to the zeitgeist. I hate using that word, but the cultural zeitgeist of the moment. But, and here's the radical idea, maybe it doesn't really go much further than, hey, here's an all-female Ghostbusters. Like the fact that they have women in the roles, maybe that's really as far as it goes. The people who make these videos about the so-called feminist agenda of Ghostbusters or Star Wars or Doctor Who or whatever, Marvel Comics, and so on and so on and so on, they never seem to consider two ideas. Idea number one, as I've already covered, is maybe the so-called agenda really doesn't go any further than trying to increase women's representation and expand the sort of roles that they have. So a female lead character, some people look at that as a great accomplishment in and of itself. An all-female cast for a beloved franchise comedy movie, that the all-female cast is sort of the beginning and end of the agenda. And why they want it is, again, the what they're after doesn't really seem to extend much further than they want greater representation in a wider range of roles and not just constantly be relegated to side characters. That it's not very deep. And the second and related idea is the reason that it's not very deep is because it's Hollywood and it's entertainment and it's the BBC. And at the end of the day, they're really not radical. They're trying to serve mainstream fare to a wide audience, and in their calculation, having more roles for women, having more prominent roles, lead character roles, is part of the cultural zeitgeist. So at one level, it's pandering a little bit, sure, but it's not promoting some broader man-hating, what's the term that they like to use? Not misandrist agenda, you know. It's Spice Girl feminism. Remember back in the 90s, at the beginning of third wave feminism, you had all this radicalism, and then all of that sort of by the later 90s became like Spice Girl, girl power, and it's just something completely commercialized. Because the thing about radical ideologies is that they tend not to survive commercialization. And what could possibly be more commercial in the realm of entertainment than Star Wars? So in my view, yes, Hollywood's pandering a little bit and trying to keep up with the times and so on, but it's not really a radical agenda because it doesn't go much further than what you see on the surface. Here's some female characters, because some people view that more or less as an end unto itself for reasons that aren't that profound or radical. But the people complaining about these things, they have to drill down and hyper microanalyze these movies and television shows to prove that there is a broader anti-man agenda to many of these things. And so what happens when they start to pick apart these movies is that they end up sounding a hell of a lot like the feminists they ridicule as ridiculous, because they're engaging in the same sorts of critiques and analysis, just from a different point of view and trying to reach different conclusions. So, pick one. Either people like Anita Sarkeesian are silly for hyperanalyzing every little detail of something and finding the patriarchy, every overturned stone, there's the bugs of the patriarchy go scurrying out from under. Either people such as her who engage in that sort of analysis or ridiculous, or things that we might otherwise view as trivial, such as entertainment, are capable of being analyzed in such a way as to reveal things about them that would otherwise not be obvious. Now, just because something is capable of being analyzed doesn't mean that every analysis is correct. That's a matter of methodology, hermeneutics, etc., etc. The problem most often with any sort of analysis or critique of something usually comes down to the quote, "We are always paid for our suspicions by finding what we suspect." Psychologists call that confirmation bias. And part of the reason that I find many of these videos so hyperbolic is because I come at things from a completely different worldview. In my worldview, although Hollywood may pander, it lacks the sincerity necessary to actually be radical. At the end of the day, pushing a radical agenda isn't as important to them as making millions or billions of dollars, and a token gesture is not quite the same thing. The problem with arguing about these things is that if I have a fundamentally different understanding of how the entertainment industry operates than they do, then it's possible to come to radically different conclusions and seem reasonable, at least to ourselves. That's not to say that you are being reasonable, just that it's pretty much the easiest thing in the world for people to convince themselves that they're right. So I say there is something of an agenda and there is pandering, but it's pretty much all on the surface and self-evident. But what I find interesting about a lot of these videos is that although they occasionally make claims about the misandry of this or that element of the movie and how it's promoting an anti-man, pro-woman, female supremacist agenda or something else like that, that by and large they don't really spell out exactly what this social justice feminist agenda is supposed to be exactly. They don't explain it and examine it and say, here's why we shouldn't have it. It's by and large rather vague. They want to use this idea of it having an agenda as a way to attack changes which otherwise they would just come off sounding sexist or racist or whatever. So their beloved IP now has a female protagonist, or they're including more diverse cast of characters. Well, they can't say that they don't like that for any reason that would get them labeled as a sexist. They can't just say, I don't want a woman Jedi. They can't say that. So they have to say, it's pushing a feminist agenda. It's pushing a diversity, social justice agenda. Because it's a way of complaining about these things without pointing directly to the thing and saying, there, I don't want that in my beloved intellectual property. Because then they just seem like an asshole. In other words, if the agenda is to increase diversity, then the people who are against that aren't going to come out and say that they're against increased diversity. They have to make it seem as if they're against the agenda, the substance of which they never really address. They want to pretend as if the gold standard is to be apolitical and to have no message and no perspective, and anything that violates that standard is some sort of egregious assault on good taste. How dare there be politics in my entertainment and storytelling? As if there aren't already. It's just not obvious to them because they don't examine it from that point of view. As I see it, a lot of them are simply being close-minded and convincing themselves that they don't like something because such and such a change, when if they just chilled out a bit and went with it and rolled with the punches, took it on its own merit, they might say, hey, this isn't such a big deal that there's a female doctor or a female master or a female cast of Ghostbusters, or hey, maybe the real problem with the movie wasn't that the cast was all women, just that the movie wasn't that funny. Or hey, maybe the problem isn't that Rey's the protagonist, it's that it's a rehash of A New Hope or whatever. They can judge things on its own merit instead of just automatically like, an agenda, oh my god. So in conclusion, maybe try chilling out a bit. Oh, and also I thought Michelle Gomez was great as Missy. But anyway, have a good whatever time it is.